Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the BAMcast, where it's my goal to create an environment that can help you to learn, grow, and evolve by any means necessary. Today, we have a very special episode with my friend, my mentor, my business partner with AR Funnel, Mike Crowson. Expect to learn in this episode what your friends are going to think and say about you when you become an entrepreneur, a little bit about Mike's story and how he's got to where he is, where he has sold his company that did $10 million in e-commerce sales, coffee over cardio, in over 240,000 orders, and also why entrepreneurship is not for everyone. This was a very fun episode to record. Great to just get to talk to Mike in an environment that's not work related, and to kind of just get to talk and connect on a different level and in a different way. I hope you guys will enjoy this episode. If you do, make sure and hit that like button or that subscribe button wherever you're watching, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. It's a very new show, so we're trying to get it in front of more people, and I understand that those things will help me to do so. Hope you guys enjoy the episode, and without further ado, let's hop right in. All right, what is up, Mike?
What's going on, man?
I am super excited for this one. This is going to be episode 2. So you are the first guest on the podcast. So you should feel very honored.
I'm very blessed.
But I'm super excited because I think you have a really cool story, man. And I want to kind of go through some of your story if you're comfortable with that.
Sure.
And then I want to kind of just shoot the crap, talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we have going on. Talk about what makes us work as a team from your perspective, because I'm interested to see what you think, and go from there. But first of all, dude, tell the people, I'm putting an intro right before this just so you know with some context, but tell the people who you are, what you do, a little bit about yourself.
Sure, man. Mike Crowson, Alabama native, 23 years, moved to New York, 3 years, worked at a supplement company, left there, moved to back to Alabama, then to Huntington Beach, then to Dallas, and then next week moving to St. Louis. And so I'm a man that likes to take risks. I am a business owner. I guess now that I sold Coffee for Cardio, I'm also a person that's exited from a company as well. This is AR being our third company that those who don't know that me and you are partnered in.
Yep.
And I'm an entrepreneur and a person that basically just believes that I can make something happen and makes some excuses for it and goes after it. Um, Risk taker is probably how I could probably best put it.
Yeah.
Not the smartest guy in the world, but I definitely give it my all with some good hard work behind it.
Yeah. I think that's a very accurate kind of way to describe yourself. And one thing that I want to hop into and dive a little bit deeper on, push you to share a little bit more on
Sure.
is let's talk about that first move, because you grew up in what I would equate to the equivalent of, and maybe it was smaller, maybe it was bigger, I don't know, but I mean, I grew up in small town Oklahoma, right, which is not probably too different from small town Alabama, being that, I grew up with, there was 5,000 people in my town. I graduated with 70 kids, right? Like everybody knew everything about you. It's the place where most people never end up leaving. I'm sure you had a similar background, but talk about, how do you go from small town Alabama to New Jersey, right? Like why? What was that situation like for you?
Well, we grew up. I had 30,000 people in my zip code. We had a school of 2,000,
Mm-hmm.
so it's pretty large school. We were the second largest in the state. But um, with Alabama, whenever I left, I became big time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which to me is like didn't feel like the case. And I'll be honest with you, and I don't really share this story too much, but what pushed me out of there was pain. Had a bad relationship essentially ending when I was 21, and I had an opportunity to move to New York, where the year prior my parents got divorced. My mom moved to New Jersey, so I basically moved up there with her for 4 weeks before I had to get my own place, and that's a whole nother story of trying to find a place living with 10 strangers. But essentially, it came about with needing something new. And really, as much as I was looking for something new, I was also running.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an opportunity that come across for me to go do fitness modeling. Back when I was really in it, and like I took some photos and they went really viral. I had some book covers for some romance novels that I did, which is what allowed me to have that essentially. Now, this is in 2012, so this is a
Yeah.
long time ago. Dating myself, showing some gray hair here. But
Yeah.
back before Instagram was really a thing, it was just kind of like starting out for some people. But Facebook essentially where it started. I started doing online coaching at that time too. And I got to give credit to my good friend and buddy, Frankie Guerra, who basically pushed me because he saw more of myself than I saw myself. Because I never thought I was good enough. And he always viewed me as like this figure that had so much potential. And I wouldn't be in the situation today without him. But it was the push between him, it was the pain to leave, and then the courage to go. And that's really what it boiled down to, is like the courage to do something new. Because like I was a personal trainer, 22, making $4,000 a month cash
Yeah.
as a student in college, and I graduated. So like, I mean, I had it going on. Like I felt like I was big time in a little
Yeah.
city. And then I went from big fish to like, you're not even a freaking tadpole
Yeah.
a mile outside New York, right? So it's a complete game change for me. Went through a lot of depression in that move because I didn't move for a lot of the right reasons, right? Because you were running. So I still had to deal with that shit. Now I was doing it by myself and alone,
Mm-hmm.
in the biggest, busiest city in the United States. And so I think that for me, I think the main focus was just like, hey, I just want something new in my life. Because as a trainer at the time, there was a gentleman, great trainer, and it was 4:30 in the morning, and I had to get there early for a client. He was there, and he had longer hair, and it was all scruffy, and he had on sweatpants, a baggy Smurf T-shirt, and flip flops. And I looked over, and I was like, "Is that going to be me?" And I was like, "No, like this is not the life I want to live. This is not why I went to school. This is not what like I feel like I'm just running this rat race of like this is going to be me." And I was like, "I
Yeah.
got to make a change." And so I think I was running from that and the afraid of me getting stuck in that rut. And so moving to New York allowed me to start something new in a completely different mindset and having to essentially start over. Because every trainer, I feel like that's one of the biggest things they struggle with. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is what I have. And if I leave and I move cities or I do something different, I have to start from scratch because I have nothing. And that's the truth. Like you have to start over.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are not in a position to do so. So I was blessed enough to take that risk at a young age where I've got time to rebound. I don't have kids. I'm not married. I don't have responsibilities that require a financial commitment. And so I just went with it. And
Yeah.
a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, but I made it through.
Yeah. Talk about like whenever you first got there, right? I know the story. I've heard you speak on the story multiple times. Talk about when you first got there, how I've seen the book covers, the things that you've been on, the pictures of you with the big beard and all the modeling
Yeah.
shoots and everything. But talk about whenever you got there and you kind of like, what is that like when you walk into that apartment for the first time, going from small town Alabama to New Jersey, mile outside of New York? What is that like when you walk into the apartment for the first time or wherever you're staying, and you're
Yeah.
like,
Well,
"What am I doing?"
so when I was at my mom's for 4 weeks, and she was moving out west, which is further from the city, which is the opposite of where I needed to go. I actually moved closer because I was doing a 66-minute train ride into the city to work a catering job that I had to leave at a certain time because I had to catch the last train out of the city or I'm stuck overnight, right?
Yeah,
And so I moved into a duplex with 10 strangers. One of them I knew from a friend that I knew that I went to New York with 3 years prior or 2 years prior. And so it's really also another stranger. And I had
hmm
a bedroom that had a closet that had a shower in it. and then a sink and a toilet that was a closet makeshift that had that, and then a bed.
Mhm.
I paid $700 for that, and shared kitchen with everybody, shared basically washer and dryer. Um, coming from somebody that like lived on their own or had like one roommate, and that I was in a house, lot different, right? I had to commute everywhere. I had to shovel my car off of the street. I had more parking tickets than I could count because you can't be there during certain hours, and I might get a
Yeah.
ticket while I was working, or you got to be moving different parking spot by 6 a.m. because they got to clean the streets, and it was just a lot of new stuff for me. And I think the mindset for me, I like dove so much in the bodybuilding to also escape that reality of like, hey, this sucks. This is not what I want. This isn't what I signed up for. And I thought, like, well, I can just dive all this mental focus into bodybuilding and it'll carry me out of this.
Mhm.
And a few things went the right way to where I had a guy that I went to high school with actually become sponsored at a supplement company called Shreds. And he came up and I was like, hey, like, you want to grab dinner? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. Come over and meet me at, this guy's apartment who also worked at the company as influencer. So I went over to his apartment and we got a workout in together with everybody and had a good time, met some of the other employees there. Ended up getting a job there as a ninth employee in the business. So it's basically a ground level supplement company called Shreds, if anybody's ever heard of that before.
Mhm.
And I essentially was there 2.5 years. But the process to like getting there, I was like 9 months of catering and doing those gigs and those jobs where I'd be a bartender, which was actually probably one of the coolest jobs I ever had. Getting to work for cater an event with Macklemore and Xbox One launch, right? That's how we're dating ourselves when the Xbox One came
Yeah.
out, right?
And Macklemore.
Right. Black Sabbath concert, an Audi dealership throwing a party where I'm on a rooftop. I remember when I did an event just for a woman that was turning 40 in a New York penthouse where I'm basically have a bow tie and pants, no shirt. And I remember getting tipped like $300. And I was like, whoa, like
Yeah.
this is wild. Like, these people have so much money. And like, really, it's like this
Yeah.
$300. Like, it's not that much money, right? But
Mhm.
to me, it was like, God, man, I can make $300 a week. Like, I
Mhm.
was like not making any money because I couldn't get a normal job because I was taking acting classes and had to be on call to go to photo shoots or auditions, where I quickly realized, like, hey, it's really hard to get a job in New York with a country accent.
Yep.
That firefighter position was going to somebody that had a really like New York accent or an Italian accent or something from the Bronx. I just didn't fit the part. Like,
Yeah.
it was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Like, it just didn't mesh no matter how good I was. I just couldn't open my mouth.
Mhm.
And that's when I had to learn how to like speak better and get people to understand me. And I also realized that there's a lot of judgment for somebody from the South because you're an idiot, you're dumb, you don't
Yeah.
know anything. And so it was a lot of learning in those aspects that made me have to like go from like 22 to 32 on a maturity level very fast to realize like you will get swallowed whole here if you don't adapt and don't
Yeah.
change.
Well,
And
a
so
lot of
there's a lot of
people out in the Northeast and, even on the West Coast, they think that I'm from Oklahoma. They think that we still ride our horses to school, right? And they think everybody's living in teepees. And like, I've been asked that legitimately before. Like, so how does it work with you guys riding your horses to school? Like, how does traffic? And I'm like, that's not. That was like you're talking 100 years
yeah,
ago, right? That
yeah,
anybody rode a horse to school.
it's completely different. And the fact that I wanted to drive places, people are like, you have a car?
Yeah.
Like, why do you have a car? And I was like, well, it's my one piece of autonomy that I do have is
Yeah.
going, if I want to go somewhere I can, versus like, because up there you're like on the clock. I don't care what you got going on, you got to make that train.
Hmm.
Like, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, you want to get to work on time, don't be late to the train station. You can't make it up by going 10 miles an hour faster for the speed limit. If
Yeah.
traffic sucks, like, you're screwed. So walk faster. You got to run to the train station. Like, so there's a lot of changes that I had to make to realize, like, hey, it's no longer about me anymore. It's about the man. It's about the
Yeah.
time. Like I'm irrelevant now in this big city. And that was a big adjustment that I had to make. Um, but yeah, I mean, they always say that if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And I feel like some of that is true on certain levels. But I also believe that if you can make it in a small town where there's less opportunity, then you also can make it in other places as well.
Yeah.
Because you got a lot more opportunity in New York, but you also have a lot more competition. And so also realizing that, hey, in 10 years ago, New York, $50,000 was poverty.
Yeah.
So I lived at a poverty level, which I'd never done before because I come from making more money than the average 30-year-old in cash as a personal trainer to now you're poverty making less than the average person that lived in New York. It's like, dude, this is like a completely different lifestyle change. And then obviously bodybuilding, I'm eating so much protein. I'm 250 pounds. Like I'm having to eat pounds of food a day or pounds of food per meal, essentially. So it
Hmm.
was just a lot of adjusting and getting accustomed to things before I was able to start to make an income at the supplement company to start to live the lifestyle that I had. So I took like 10 steps back to then come back just to normal before I was really able to move forward. Because, like in my personal life, like I didn't make six figures until I was 29 years old.
Hmm.
Like people's like, dude, like, oh, you're big time. You live in New York. I'm like, I'm broke.
Yeah.
Like it looks cool, but it ain't cool, you
Yeah.
know?
That's cool. So I think that you have one of the, and we're not even going into all of it, right? Like there's a lot of steps of that story that we've talked about before. I'm sure we'll get into on other episodes and everything, so we don't have to dive into everything today. But I want to talk about a phrase that I've heard you mention several times. Many times, what it takes to be successful is you have to be just stupid enough to make it,
Mm.
and you've correlated that saying to yourself several times. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine, Matt Smoyak, who we used to work together at Shreds, and I left the company. And essentially, he stated it to me whenever I started Coffee over Cardio, and it was really in the beginning of 2020 when it really started to take off. And basically, what he said was, like, "You're dumb. You're just dumb enough to be successful." I
Hmm.
was like, "What are you talking about?" And I got to thinking about it more, and this is when it really started to hit. So obviously, if you're a straight A student, you are smart enough to know that the chances of you making it and being successful as an entrepreneur is not likely. The odds of you failing are greater than the odds of you succeeding, and which is a calculated risk. And then on top of that, if you want to excel and do seven figures in your business, you've got to risk it even more and put more on the line to growing and being successful there. And that
Yep.
comes doing ads. And so I didn't realize it, but I would do stupid things that the average person would view as being dumb, but it was me taking the risk because I'm just dumb enough to take the risk. But you're never
Yep.
going to succeed in anything in life if you're not willing to take the risk, right? If you don't lean in to kiss the girl, you're not going to ever kiss the girl.
Well,
But you also got to be dumb enough
it
to
brings
do it, right?
yeah, it brings me back to something that I've heard countless times on Chris Williams' podcast, Modern Wisdom. He talks about how he's interviewed, hundreds of high achievers at this point, and one of a few correlations stand out between those people above all else. And I'm gonna butcher this, but I think one of them was they have at least a minor case of a superiority complex, right? So they have a belief that they're meant for something more in life, right? More than what the normal person is meant to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
They pick themselves apart more than other people. Okay. He talked about how most of them underperform in school. They don't do well in kind of like systems, but they
Yep.
pick themselves apart more than other people. They believe that they are destined for more. And then there was one other point. I think it's something along the lines of um, they believe that other people don't have as much utility as them. Like, for instance, like I don't have as much utility to enact something that would be impactful or do something for you as you have utility to be impactful or do something for you. And I think this kind of like loops into what you're talking about with you talking about how you feel like you've always been kind of like just dumb enough to make it happen. Is you do believe that if somebody's going to make it happen, you're going to be the one to make it happen, right? And you do believe that you alone, like it's hard for a lot of us as entrepreneurs to release the reins. You and I have had multiple conversations about that on different topics.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to do the same thing. And it's because we don't believe that other people, not that they're not capable, but we don't believe that they have the same utility. Maybe they're going to care as much. Maybe they're going to do as much, work as hard, put as much attention in. We don't have to believe that others have the utility to move the needle per se as much as we do, as much
Yeah.
as you do.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I would say probably for myself, the last 2 years, I've learned more about myself than I have in the last decade.
Yeah.
And going back to that, what Matt basically called me just dumb enough, to give some context on that, and it's going to tie into what you said, is that we were doing like $10,000 on ads a day, or excuse me, a
Mhm.
month. And an ad was performing well at $150 a day. And I was like, hey, it's doing well. I was like, let's increase it. He was like, how much? $5? I was like, no, increase it like $50. And he was like, you sure? It's not very smart. I was like, yeah. So we increased it and it performed. Next day, I was like, hey, do another $50. And he was like, you sure? It's not very smart. He's like, it's a risk. You might lose $300. I was like, yeah, I know. Do it. Like, again, going back to the risk taking. And he's like, okay. It performed. 2 days later, I was like, double it. Make it $300. He's like, you sure? And then that performed. And I was like, make it $5,000 a day on this one ad. And he was like, no. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll do it. So I got in, changed it to 5,000, hit enter, and said, let me know how it goes. And the next day, I opened it up and it performed. And he was like, I can't believe it's working. And I was like, increase it. We got up to spending from $10,000 a month to $212,000 a month in 6 months. Just dumb enough to make it work. But see, here's the thing is people are afraid of what they're going to lose, not optimistic about what it is they have to gain.
Yep.
And so, but you got to be willing to take the risk to make that happen. You got to be willing to move to New York. You got to be willing to move to LA. You got to be willing to take a step back to take, multiple leaps forward. And that's why complacency kills. And so what I learned about myself actually here recently was I took a test called Strength Finder, and 5 things I learned about myself. And it's my 5 strengths. Because oftentimes we try to focus on our weaknesses, but truthfully, that doesn't help us become better. It just makes us
No.
not suck as less.
Yep.
And also, too, when you have to focus on things you're not good at, that also means that you're in a negative mindset because you're like, I suck at this. I need to become better, instead of I'm great at this. Let's excel in this area.
It just gives you more buckets you have to try to fill versus like absolutely overflowing these 4 or 5 areas where you are already amazing.
Yes. And so for myself, what I learned is that number one, I'm futuristic. So what that means is I focus on the future. Okay. Now, every strength to me also ties into a weakness, whether it's business or personal. Okay. I focus on the future. What does that mean? That means that I look forward to tomorrow and see big picture. There comes to me with an idea. I mull on it and I say, hey, let's go ahead and do this, 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 and this. And he's like, I talked about that 8 weeks ago. I'm like, I know, I've been thinking about it. Now it's time to implement it. Here's the strategy and how we're going to do it versus just throwing it against the wall.
Yeah.
And so take that and run with it. The second piece was competition. This falls in the piece that you were talking about, to where it's like we struggle with letting other people do it when we're like, I'll just do it myself.
Yep.
But you can never grow, truly grow alone.
Yep.
You got to have other people that can basically put those things into play for you, and you got to put trust in they can make it happen. and always wanting to win. I'm not afraid of losing, which is why I'm willing to spend the money, because I'm not afraid of losing. If so, I'm going to learn from it, implement it, and double down on that.
Yep.
The third piece for me was a strategic. And so I have to plan it out and see it through. And that's why it take me 8 weeks to develop the strategic plan to execute that future idea. And so I'm able to see, with our company now, it's like, what happens from this step all the way to this step, not just the one issue, because the one issue is going to lead to another problem. And I would think about each problem you're going to have in every scenario and map it out and say, this is the path we take, right? I look at it as like Google Maps. It's not about the next turn. It's about what happens when I make that turn. What's the next turn I have to take after that? And there's a roadblock. Maybe we shouldn't take a right here. Maybe we should take a left to avoid the traffic that we're going to have in 10 minutes from now.
Yeah.
The fourth piece was an analytic. Same thing. I'm diving into how it all works. What is the likelihood or the risk management associated with that thing happening? And the fourth piece being a high achiever. Being a high achiever, essentially, I have to do something every day to be successful, to feel like I did something and not that I'm just lazy, not that
Yeah.
I'm a loser. All those things make it difficult for me. And now that I'm really, really problem aware of being in the moment in my personal life, with celebrating the small wins in business and in personal life, understanding that I have to shut off at some points and that it's okay if I don't do something that day. That doesn't make me any less than, that doesn't make me not enough.
Yeah.
It's just because you tell yourself something doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Just like when you tell
Yeah.
yourself that, oh, I didn't work out today, I'm lazy and I'm worthless. It's like, well, no, I just took a rest day. And so for myself, it's like I've really kind of learned, I think you've kind of seen this happen for me too, is like when it's time to push, I give it my all, but when it's time to rest, I need the rest, because you can't keep pushing without breaking, and you've got to have some maintenance and repair in that. And then,
Yeah.
so it's a really interesting concept to learn how you tick. And a lot of people want to learn that at 22 years old, and it's just not going to happen, right? It takes time to see those things, and getting around mentors like the mentor that told me, hey, you need to take this test so that you can focus on those strengths. And when it comes to hiring people and getting people around you to do their jobs, not everybody can just do the job you want them to do, because maybe it's their weakness.
Yeah.
And essentially in this book, it's stated that 20%, you will get 20% output of an individual if they do something they do not enjoy to do. It's like, well, 20% is pretty bad, right? 40%. You'll get 20% out of somebody if you ignore them altogether. Asking questions, or you give them a little attention, you're going to get 20% of output from them because they don't feel like they're serving a purpose. 40% of those that are doing a job they don't want to do, but they know they need to do it to get paid. 80% of output from an individual that you place in a place or a position to where they thrive and want to do that project. And so now it's like, well, I'm not going to hire anybody else in my company or ever work for me ever if I don't know their strengths, because you could be amazing, but if you're not going to do the job that I need you to do, then I should expect a 40% output versus 80, because I didn't hire the right person for the right job. Doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter how much I like you. And it's like those little things make a difference in building that success in business in the right areas. So if you're not good at strategy, you need to hire somebody that's good at strategy.
Absolutely.
If you're not good at copywriting, just don't hire somebody that's good at writing if they have no ambition to actually be a good copywriter. They might be great at it, but if they don't enjoy it, they're not going to give you their all. They're just filling a void that you need for a paycheck. So, tangent there, but
No,
yeah,
yeah. I think
very
it's, I
interesting
think,
concept on success for the individual, and that goes for personal too.
yeah, I think that, I've got to take the test still, and I'm excited to see kind of what I have, but that's a perfect segue into one of the other things I wanted to talk about is from your perspective. I have my own thoughts and I can give those after. From your perspective, why do you think that you and I in particular work so well together as a team? I think we have an interesting story, and maybe you can even talk about from the beginning what happened and and how we kind of met and everything. I came to you with mentorship,
Hmm.
and I was going to hire you to be my mentor, and then we worked out, and then the flip side of that kind of happened, But like, what do you think about you and me and our individualized personalities work so well together?
Yeah. So I think you're more organized than me. It's not a strength of mine, right? I don't want to say disorganized. I've gotten more organized, but I think you run much better by a calendar and checklist than I do. I feel like I'm really good at creating my own checklist, but I'm not very good at creating checklists for other people and then holding them to that. I feel like you are better at that just from an organizational standpoint. Um, I also think that you flush out my ideas because I have a lot of them. That doesn't mean they're all winners. And I
Hmm.
think you're able to put some context to those and make them to where they just make more sense.
Be
Um,
the Mike translator, as we always joke.
yes. Yeah. So you're able to take something and put it into play. Um, I think that you're probably a little bit more level headed than I am, um, being that I feel like I run with a lot of stress and you're able to dissolve that and take some actionable items to take away from wherever the ideas or stresses might be. I think we're also very similar. I think that's also important too, is that you understand and get what I'm trying to accomplish or come from because you can see that as well. Um, I also feel you're probably more of a learner than I am. It's like you want to learn how it works and the whys versus because I don't do a very good job of explaining things because I'm not, in my opinion, a great leader. And I feel like I'm an amazing lone wolf. And that's really difficult to build a business and grow on, right? And I feel like we've
Yeah.
had even our quarrels is about me being a lone rider, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think you like get the vision and you kind of see the vision. Um, but I think all in all, I think once we find your test, we're gonna be able to really see those pieces together
Yeah, I'm
too.
excited to see that. I think you hit on a lot of points that I also see with us. I think the biggest and most impactful of which is we can talk about kind of how your brain works and some of those things. You've kind of already hit on a few of them, but I think that you do have a ton of extremely creative ideas and just ways that you approach problems, right? Like you have a lot of ways that you approach things in a very different way from most people. And for me, I've always been somebody that if I do have one of those ideas, they don't come to me as frequently. But if I do have one of those ideas, I can make things happen. I've always like we talk about the superiority complex. That's probably my version of it, right? I came from the opposite side of it. I was always had kind of effortlessly straight A's. Like I had a high
Mhm.
ACT score. I had straight A's all through high school, A's and B's all through college, and I didn't really feel like I had to try that hard. But I also always thought that like if I needed to like buckle down and 2 days out from the final, learn everything about that class and go in and get an A to get a B or an A in the class, like I would do
Yeah,
that and it wasn't a problem, right? And so I
yeah.
think that
I
I
feel like you're
take
definitely smarter than me from an intellectual standpoint. I do feel like I am more creative. Also,
yeah,
feels like that's what's led me to. I think. Well, let's be very clear. When I was your age, we are not on the same level. You are so far above me than where I was. Um, but again, I think that the pairing well of that is right. I was an AB student. I had to study. I
yeah,
had to take notes. But here's another thing about me. It's like for me to learn, I just need to hear you talk.
yeah,
If I'm not smart enough and my brain doesn't work fast enough for me to write and listen at the same time.
yeah,
So I could not take notes. I had to just listen. I can't read. I can't multitask in that way. I'm just not intelligent enough to make that work. My ACT score combined after taking the test 3 times was a 21.
yeah. I got a 20 in seventh grade.
Yeah. So like, but meanwhile, my brother got a 32, and he
Yeah,
didn't even buy the books. And I'm sitting here like, dying to try to make
You're
it
like,
work.
screw you, dude.
But if somebody throws something across my plate, I can like fix it and solve it in a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
But
And your
that's the
brain just
difference
works
between like
in
a
such,
great employee and somebody willing to take the risk. Because my brother would never take a risk that did not show a significant favor in the outcome before he got started, which is why he's an aerospace engineer and does testing now to
Mhm.
test to see if these rockets are up to par or not. And I'm like, just let it fire, man. Let it rip. Let's see what we got.
Yeah.
So the opposite of those type of positions, right?
Yeah. But I think that's
So
why we work so well together, because if when you have when you throw an idea out there, it allows me to spark up my creative juices and to allow my brain to kick in how it works to see, okay, we've got this idea. I see the merit here in, sub parts A, D, and F. And what can we take these three things and really make this into something actionable, put systems in place and go make this happen? Like, how can we do that?
yeah,
Right. And so I think that we complement each other really well on that aspect of, you've got way more experience than me in the entrepreneurial realm. I've had my share of business failures and successes and things like that. You've done it all on a much higher level than me. But I think we complement each other in that way of like, you have such a different, you approach problems in the way that only the consumer, like the real genuine consumer, can approach them, which I think is a superpower of yours, being honest. And allow yourself to come up with ideas from that perspective, which people just really resonate with and click with. Where you, like you said, where you don't have the strengths is putting that stuff into action. Like, here's this great idea, here's all these very highly merited ideas and different portions of this plan. How do we put that in action? And so I think
yeah,
that's where I come in, and I think it just makes I mean, look what we've been able to build right in
yeah,
knowing each other right at a year now. And it all
yeah,
started with me coming in, having one conversation about some of the stuff I had. Then we had a workout, and you're like, I got an idea. Why don't you come work for me? I'm like, okay. So
yeah.
that's kind of how
Because
it
I mean,
started.
just throw some numbers out there, just transparent for all the listeners. In a year's time of working together inside the coaching space, we've drummed up um, about $420,000
Yep.
in a 12-month-old idea. And now we're at a rate to where we're
Well,
growing so
eight
fast
month,
that
8 month old. Well, going on 9 month old
yeah,
idea.
yeah. And
January
so
15th.
right. And that's just me going back to the group, right? Adding in like $10,000 over the last few months of that, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're projected, based on growth and like, because here's the cool thing about it is like you spark an idea. So you give me a little bit of a flame. I'm able to turn into a fire, and then you're able to take that fire and maintain it and keep it burning. I think
Yeah.
that's the really cool piece is that we start a spark. I bring like all these outlandish thoughts and ideas that the typical person doesn't think about because to be an entrepreneur, you got to think in a different way. It's
You do.
completely different. Um, so when you look at something, you don't see it for what it is. You see on why it is that way.
Yeah.
And so, which takes a lot of time to get into thinking in that mode, right? Like when you walk into an auditorium, you think, well, that was an error because look at all this wasted space, which would have calculated in blah, 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 X amount of money they could have made by doing this or that. Oh, but they didn't do that because they needed the lights for this structure. And so you see things just completely differently, understanding the why, not just the what. Um, and so that's where I think it makes it to where you create that spark. I'm able to take that spark and go, ooh, and then I just blow up with ideas on it. And then you're like, those are really great. Let's pick these pieces. And now here's how we're analytically going to put them into play.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly summed up. Now, I want to kind of get into a couple of extra quotes that I have here that I want to get kind of your take on. I know you have a
Okay.
hard stop, right? How long do you have?
No, I've got time.
Okay, cool. How about this one? So, this ties into some of the stuff we've already talked about today, but if you always plan on starting tomorrow, you'll have a lot of wasted yesterdays.
Mm. Yeah. So my first ever quote that I gave myself was every day's Monday. Every day is Monday. And obviously that was as a coach, as a trainer. Because we always wait till Monday. We always wait till the next month. We always wait to, New Year's resolutions. 1% of people take action. And so if you want to be the 1%, the number one thing you have to do is take action and not fear losing. And so the idea of an idea that doesn't take action is really just a wish. It's not an it's not something that's actionable. So you got to take action, or you might as well just stop thinking, because if you're not willing to take thoughts and put them into play, all you're doing is just telling yourself, well, that's good, but I'm not going to do it. And it's like, well, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So I think you have to move forward. You've got to take action. You've got to move the needle, whether it be business, whether it be personal, your own mental health, your own physical health. You just have to get moving. Or you might as well just stop thinking about it, because it's irrelevant if you don't do anything about it.
Yeah. And I've heard you say before, if you're not growing, you're dying. And a lot of times that is the case. I mean, think about it from just a purely physiological perspective. What happens to most elderly people when their kids are grown up and when they're retired?
When they
They
retire, they
deteriorate
start to decline fast because you stop
rapidly.
doing anything mentally, not even physically, mentally. When your brain shuts off and you stop taking action and doing, you're just digging an early grave, which is why you see so many millionaires and billionaires never stop working. It's not because they can't, it's because they need something to do. And they're that person that has to achieve something every day. And as soon as you kill that flame, they're going to die.
And there are
It's
so
just a
many
matter of when.
people. Exactly. There are so many people too that I talked about it in episode 1, where a lot of people just coast through life without ever kind of like waking up and realizing or questioning what else is there? What
Mm.
else can I do? What else can I be? They just kind of fall into, maybe I went to high school, maybe I got the degree or the bachelor's or whatever, and then I'm at my job. And so now my schedule is wake up, go to my job, come home, crack a few beers, go to sleep, wake up, go to my job. Like that's just an endless cycle for 50 years.
Mhm.
And they never actually question, what else is there another job that I might be better suited for, that maybe pays me better or puts me in a better situation or allows me to be more creative or enjoy this more? Are there things that I can do outside of my job that will allow me to have some sort of outlet, have a hobby, stimulate me physically or mentally?
Yeah.
Are there feats out there that I can put myself through, whether it's running a marathon or doing a bodybuilding show, that can put me to my edge and help me to figure out who I really am? I know so many people that are caught in that kind of web, and they
Rat race.
never those are the same people that you were talking about that look at you, right? Or looked at you whenever you moved away and thought, wow, Crowson's
Big
doing it
time.
big. He's doing big stuff out there. And it's just because you broke the mold of
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do in small town out of Alabama.
I think even more so than that individual, because that person sometimes really hard to break that 30-year curse that you're in. The ones that I really want to touch are the ones that read and research every day on how to do it and still work the 9 to 5. It's like, well, when I learn enough information, I'm going to do it. And it's like,
Yeah,
dude, I started with zero information. I just was like, I learned Shopify on my own. I learned
same.
Facebook ads on my own. Like, just start the free trial, sacrifice the $29. Like, do something to
Exactly.
implement the knowledge that you're learning. I know so many people that read a book a week on self improvement and have been doing that for 5 years
I've never put anything into action
and still have the 9 to 5.
outside of taking a picture of the quote and throwing it up on their story.
It's like, you want to be inspirational, do something about it.
I had a
Don't just quote people.
exactly. I had a kind of a similar story to what you're talking about. So, right after college, I moved to Dallas, followed Kinsey, right? And I thought there'd be more opportunity for me here.
Mhm.
And, I followed her because I wanted to be around her, and I saw that future there, and worked out. She's my wife now, so that's a good move, I guess, in retrospect. But I it was such a similar situation to what you're talking about. I went back home one weekend, right, back to Perry, Oklahoma, and a bunch of my buddies wanted to go out to dinner. So I went out to dinner with, it ended up being like, they ended up inviting like probably 20 of the guys that I graduated high school with. And so it was like, went to Chili's and we had a huge table of all the boys kind of getting everybody back together. And they kept asking me questions. And at this point, Eubora was brand new, right? In a product business, you make $0 until that thing is huge, right? You know that.
I do.
I was doing like some personal training stuff, and I was running marketing for a couple of brands in the supplement space. And I mean, I was making a living, but it wasn't anything probably too crazy from what they were doing. But I had moved to Dallas. I went to a university, and then I went, to Dallas, Texas, which is just unthought of from Perry, Oklahoma. And towards the end of the dinner, some of the guys started like asking because they knew that I was kind of the one that sparked this dinner because I was back in town. And one of the guys even asked me, Baker, are you going to, he said, since you're a millionaire now, are you going to pick up the tab on this dinner? And like part of it was kind of like you could tell he was probing a little bit to make a little jab, like I'm the big shot type of thing. But you could also tell that he was semi-serious. Like he thought there was a chance that I would pick up the tab. And it just made me think about Alex Hormozi has that story that he tells where when he was sleeping on the gym, everybody was rooting for him.
Mm.
Everybody would say, you can do it. You got this. You can do it. Because they could see his pillow and his blanket over in the corner. But the second that he was able to hire a couple of other trainers, he could get a house or even an apartment. He had a manager for the gym, and he would walk in at 9 or 10 in the morning, and all those same people that were rooting for him and encouraging him and wanting him to succeed are saying, "Oh, Mr. Big Shot, walking in. Glad you could join us today." Like in a
Mhm.
super condescending tone. The same people that were rooting for him to achieve something and to get to this point that he had gotten to, right? Like the same friends that you would think would be pushing me to achieve more, or maybe even buying some of my stuff, right? To like help out, or you spread the word or share stuff on social media. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like a condescending, they want to judge you. Like people want you to do well, but never better than them, I guess
Mm.
is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
And that was such the misalignment with that perception, I guess, of just somebody breaking out of any norm, thinking that they're better than everyone else and being successful, automatically more successful than everybody else. That just blew my mind that my friends actually thought I had just moved somewhere, became a millionaire, and now was going to come back and take care of all of them.
Yeah. And the funny piece is I have the same stories. And I think for myself, the biggest wake up call was like, I had a buddy of mine buy a house, big house, 4,000 square feet. I had an Escalade. And I was like, dude, I was like, and we are transparent of like everything. And I was like, dude, like, I'm so envy that you have all these things and you get to get off work at 5 o'clock. And he was like, Mike, I envy you because I have to be at work at 9 o'clock in the morning. He was like, you took 17 trips last year. I took one. And so it's funny that we always want that grass is greener on the other side, right?
Yes.
And so it quickly realized that's where you have to like be in the moment of like be thankful for what you have and where you're at, and realizing that a lot of people, if you're taking the risk, they just want what you have, and you're like, man, but I just want that security that you got. Because until you make it, like I have more stress than the average person that has a job. That's why I look 42 being 34. And it's simply just because it's like the more money you make, the more problems you have.
Mm.
And when I say more money, it's not net,
No, it's
it's
not in our
gross,
pockets. Yeah.
right? Like with coffee, like the first year we did $1 million, dude, I still didn't make $100,000 because I had so much expenses and growth and new inventory and new warehouse. And it's like, dude, like you're rich. I'm like, no, man. Like, I still have another job to help me pay to fund this damn thing as it's growing too fast. Like, there's problems that come with the economies of scale. And so it's just interesting to see other people's perspective. And ignorance is bliss. When I see that security, my own ignorance, the person that's only had a job, I've never had a corporate job. I've never worked McDonald's. I've never worked retail. I've
Yeah.
never had a POS system that I've plugged in and collect money. Like, I don't understand what that feels like. I also only know what it feels like to collect a paycheck for 2 years out of the last 15. It's like I can't relate to that, but man, that sounds really nice to know that I'm having that paycheck every week. You don't have to worry. Is there something that's going to happen that's going to make me not get paid this month? And they just can't fathom the idea of like not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. But I also can't fathom what it's like to not be able to take off on a Friday if I don't want to. Right. And so it's like grass is always greener. But the truth is like we sign up for what we sign up for.
Yeah.
Right. I signed up for this. I can't complain about it. I only can be grateful and say, hey, tomorrow's another day. Let's get after it. And for them, they go, hey, like they should take the approach of, hey, I can't complain about this. I signed up for this. This is what I want. I can't complain about not having more vacation time because this is what I signed up for. You want more vacation time? Quit your job and let that stress. And people's like, oh no, man, I'm good. I don't want to risk it. And I'm like, I'm willing to fucking risk it. I'm willing to, be in a house with 10 people. I'm willing to move across state lines and spend thousands to get there. I'm willing to not increase my personal income for a decade to have the freedom to live and do whatever I want whenever I want. Even though I'm going to spend most of that time working just like they are, at least I know that I can take off. At least I know that I can go play golf when I want to, if I can afford to go play.
Hmm.
Right? It's just a different mindset. And the truth is, like, it's not for everybody.
It's
Like,
not.
entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Just like that 9 to 5 is not for everybody. You can't want to be an entrepreneur and it just happen.
No.
You can't create a product and it just becomes successful.
And if
Let
it
me say a
does, you
little
better keep
facts
your
for
head
you
on a
guys that
swivel.
are listening. Yeah. 2% of all companies do 7 figures. At the same time, 2% of women do 6 figures a year. The odds of your business failing are greater than your business succeeding. Somebody wants to open up a gym, 20% or 80% of gyms close in the first 5 years. It's not for everybody. And also, too, like people want to start a business and start a product. I promise you, if you start a product company, the odds of you being successful are so small. That's why I always preach, hey, start a service, learn how to sell, and then you can figure out how to think to create a product that solves the solution, that
Yeah.
solves the problem with the solution.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with the stress side of things that I've had to, with us scaling at the rate that we've scaled and with everything that we've kind of, all the growing pains that we've experienced, it's definitely the most stress that I have ever experienced in a year's time. And it affects, like what you're saying is it's not for everybody, because it's not everybody is willing to subject themselves to that.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a special type of, glutton for pain type of guy or girl that is willing to just endure those things. Like Kinsey and I had a conversation the other day where she was wanting to go work out or do cardio or something like that late at night, and she was like, do you have anything that you need to work on like while I'm gone? And I was like, Kinsey, the only reason that I stopped working is to spend time with you. I could work the entire night if you want me to. That's what I used to do when we were not living together, is I would
Yeah.
just work the rest of the night. The only reason I stopped working is to be a husband, to be with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are telling me that I can go work, I'll go work and I'll go continue to do stuff, because I have a lot of shit that I could be doing at all the hours of the day. And she just like looked at me for a second, kind of shocked, and then she just came up and hugged me. Right. And it's also like those are the types of things that make you emotional as a partner, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard on your relationships. It's so hard to shoulder that stress and to also not be somebody that dumps it on
On them.
everybody else,
Yep.
right? Because it's not their fault you subjected it to
Mhm.
yourself to this. It's not their fault that you set up this lifestyle for yourself. It's not their fault that you're a glutton for pain and
Yeah.
punishment and stress. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's what we chose.
And it's
And
funny
it's
you say that because I feel like there's such a correlation between fitness and business that
mhm,
I find the people that are most successful in business have put themselves through some adversity with fitness, right? You've run a marathon or you train hard or you competed before. Like you understand sacrifice for the reward and not have to cheat it or half ass it because you can't half ass a business and it be successful.
no.
Just like you can't half ass a diet and step on stage and expect to win a trophy.
Mhm.
Right. But with that sacrifice comes shutting off the world. That means friends, that means family. And I'm assuming ever since that you've started the entrepreneurship, your circle has gotten smaller. My circle is very small, very
Yep.
small, very small. For somebody that knows so many people, very small, like 5 people tops.
You find yourself stop being you're not able to relate with people that aren't living the same lifestyle. Not on
Nope.
a real level anymore.
Nope. Nope. And so that's like part of it too. It's like you want to be everybody's friend. Like that's difficult because you have to talk about and complain about your 9 to 5. It's like I don't know what you're talking about. Like I want to talk about work.
Mhm.
I want to talk about growth. I want to talk about exciting new fun things because I get to control my destiny and the 9 to 5 person does not. And that's where the miscorrelation comes in. They're like, dude, I want to talk about work. And I'm like, well, we have nothing to talk about then. And it becomes hard.
100%.
People's like, oh, you just talk about yourself. It's like, no, I want to talk about you and your work, but oh, you don't have a future.
Mhm.
I can't, I don't understand. What do you mean
Yeah.
you can't do what you want to do? What do you mean you can't implement an idea? What's HR?
Yeah. All right, I got two more questions for you. All right.
Yeah.
The first one's another quote. So I think this ties in perfectly with what we're already kind of on the. It's a good segue. The most expensive belief on earth is that there's something outside of yourself keeping you from making more money, making more gains, looking better. Right? Substitute any goal there, but the most expensive belief on earth is that there's something outside of yourself keeping you from doing more.
Yeah. Like I basically dissect that as in what excuse are you putting in front of you? Right. Like I can say, Mike, you're never going to make, $1 million a month or $1 billion of that. But like that's me setting that limit. And to achieve that goal that you have, you just have to think differently. Right. And so it's like maybe this business isn't the business I need to make $1 billion. Right. And it's probably not. Right. But at the same time, to say I can't do it, it's like, no, just what you're currently doing needs to change.
Yeah.
Right. You can own a construction company or you can own a commercial construction company. There's the same business, different models, different money. Right. It's just what are you willing to do to get there? I do feel like we limit ourselves more than we necessarily should. And I think that biggest belief is what society tells us why you can or can't do something. It's like the fact that you say, hey, I'm not good looking based on whose standards? Because somebody else told you that? But like, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that. But who told you that lie? Because it wasn't you that told yourself that. Somebody else told you that. And that's why you believe it because you're not willing to believe your own abilities. But I will take it from my parents, typically, or my close friends that I grew up with that have the 9 to 5. They're saying, man, you just need to get a 9 to 5. I had a girl tell me one time in college that she wanted somebody that just worked a 9 to 5. And I was like, I'm not that guy. You're barking up the wrong tree. And that
Yeah.
instantly killed the relationship. And in 10 days, I was like, I'm moving to New York.
That's hilarious. I had some similar ones where essentially I was in a relationship where a girl had told me that she kind of saw where I was headed and she wanted to work for a few years and then live off of me. And I that was an immediate kind of thing for me where I realized that I want someone that is driven, that kind of sees that vision, that wants to buy in, build an empire as well. So
Yeah.
it's funny that you had the same
It's funny that
type.
you say that too, because just so we're clear, the entrepreneur has the mindset that they want to have the ability to take care of everybody. There is nothing more appealing to me than making enough money to call 10 friends and say, hey, clear your calendar. I'm taking us to Cabo. Just pack
Yeah.
a bag. Don't worry about a fucking thing. Just be here at this time and say you're looking to get on a plane with Mr. Crowson.
Yeah.
Because we want to do that. Like that's a goal, is to like be that successful and be the guy. It has nothing to do with it. But there's a difference between me asking it and you asking it of me. Because that's called a mooch. And I'm not looking
Yes.
for any of those.
That's a great way to put it, because if I was going to pack that plane, it would be, you would either be family or you would be other killers that I think would eventually do the same for me or would possibly do the same for me. Right. Like,
Yeah.
not that it has to be a transactional, but it is something, it is very different if you're asking for it versus I'm volunteering it.
Yeah. And I'll take a
So
step further. I've been in this a lot longer than you.
yeah.
Family don't mean shit to me when it comes to something like that. I've got family members I haven't talked to in years
Yeah.
because you don't align with what I'm looking for in my life. I don't care
I could see that.
if it's blood or not. I'll call my friend for help before I call you for help. Right. And it's just, essentially, it's just all based on what's received versus what's given. And look, if you're looking to mooch, I can see it a mile away. And you know what? One of my biggest issues is I find that I trust myself too much, or trust people too much, but I would rather give trust to somebody than to pass judgment and not trust them. Because I also know, hey, your boy's strong enough to handle it. Bring it.
Yeah.
But that also comes through like I've had to be forged in the fire, which you already know from stuff that's happened because like business is ruthless, dude.
It is.
People will lie and cheat and steal and do everything as they can to level themselves up. And so when you find a winner, you got to do everything you can to keep them. And that's whether
Absolutely.
it's friends or family. Like it doesn't matter. In business, there is no such thing as family. It's
Well said.
loyalty.
Well said. Well, my last question. So this is called the BAMcast, which stands for by any means necessary. So what are you, Mike Crowson, going to accomplish by any means necessary in your life?
Ooh. Great question. The first thing that immediately comes to my mind was the word flourish. So, quick story. The word flourish, which is tattooed on my wrist here, it equates to the two palm trees that I also have here. So, when I moved to Huntington Beach, I bought two palm trees. They were like little, right, from Walmart, like 35 bucks. Um, and I would talk to those palm trees every single day on my Instagram story, made a thing out of it where I would say flourish, soak up all the sun, soak up all the D, flourish. The idea was to own a slice of paradise or own a slice of land that palm trees would grow, which would be deemed as paradise. So for me, by any means necessary, I will fucking own a piece of land that will be either for a homestead or a secondary piece of land or whatever it may be that has palm trees. And to me, that will happen. And it could have happened this year. Decided to put my own set aside and I moved to St. Louis with Paula and her family for a few years. But that is on my bucket list. That is something I am going to accomplish and do. And I think that's probably the best thing to state, being that this podcast was a lot about some business stuff. So palm trees, baby.
I love it. I have no doubt you'll accomplish it, man. What's next for you, for us? What do you want to leave people with?
Yeah. Well, as this podcast gets started, I'm also starting one and I'm looking forward to doing a lot of the same things, connecting with a lot more individuals. All right. I sold coffee to focus on AR. I've merged the agency to focus on AR. And my mission is to help 500 coaches essentially find their place in this world and have that online business and get that freedom and essentially give your own way of flourishing in your own life. So that's the next piece for me that I'm super excited to get started with, and continue to build and grow. It's not a matter if, it's just a matter of when. And so when I say when we get to that 500, we're well on our way.
Yeah.
So I think the big steps for me, is just building more autonomy, building more freedom, helping more people, building a schedule for myself that I can continue to, personally flourish in and grow. And we're well on our way. And I'm super excited to make it happen with you, brother.
Agreed, man. Well, Mike Crowson, everybody. Mike, thank you, man. Love you, brother. And there'll be
You too,
plenty
bro.
more of these to come.
Absolutely. Peace.